What's good, everybody? So, one of the most important things in life, in reality, like we spoke about a couple nights back, is your health, all right? And in my opinion, this is why nobody really has any clarity on how to be healthy. Because if this was really the case, we would not see so many health problems in the Western world. And in my opinion, in order to convey knowledge, convey wisdom, convey any form of personal development, especially in the realm of health, people have to become healthy enough to even understand it. Because if somebody is so backed up health wise, then that can influence their perception and their willingness to understand. And this presentation will briefly explain how this works. Okay, so pretty much one of the biggest problems in the Western world, okay, in terms of our diet, is that we're no longer eating food, right? We are actually eating food-like products, right? Food-like products. Everything we consume has some type of man-made, natural flavors, GMOs, right? Processed development that is in direct opposition towards nature, okay? And food, by definition, is really supposed to provide nourishment. The problem is that it's the food industry has become so manipulated, and all these ways in which people think are healthy strategies have actually just turned out to be marketing fads, okay? And none of the food these days, especially if we're talking about the types of meals you receive in stores, from restaurants, from fast food joints, etc., these things provide no real nourishment in our bodies, okay? And in addition to this, what people are not taking into consideration, because we deal with an allopathic medical industry, right? Many of the doctors are limited to a certain understanding of people's health and are not really taken into account when you have all these products, all these food-like products, okay, all these forms of substance that really create such a acidic environment in people's bodies, that we are dealing with a plethora of parasites, okay? And we're talking about tapeworms, right? We're talking about rope worms. We're talking about hookworms. We're talking about, all the shit that nobody really wants to take into consideration and look at, right? And even when you ask many allopathic doctors about parasites and, what would be considered antibiotics and things of this nature, it's pushed under the rug. They interpret it as if it's something that really doesn't have a major influence on people's bodies. But in reality, I think we all know that's not the truth. And I will break down a little bit of information on some really, I think, unsettling truths, but they are inconvenient truths that will hopefully inspire you to start researching and to start putting more effort into making smarter choices about your diet. Okay, so these parasites, first of all, we have to understand that these parasites that pretty much are introduced into our bodies, okay, can and only have one thing in mind, and that is surviving. And the way in which they survive is to live off of you. And because we have been introduced to this diet, right, for such a long duration of time. And the the primary, I guess, proportions of all these items that we receive in a meal develop such an acidic environment. These parasites pretty much just latch on to people's intestinal tracts and other internal organs, okay, and only care about you creating a more acidic and damaging environment for your vehicle, because that's what it is required for it to survive, okay? So, and exactly like a parasite, exactly like a serpent, okay, exactly like these snake types of characters and demeanors that we describe on the physical realm actually are existing and influencing us from within. Taking it a step further, when they latch on to us and when they become hungry, right, for candy, for processed food, for these, processed sugars, okay, for animal-based proteins filled with GMO and antibiotics and all sorts of stuff, and probably when you receive it is dead and decomposing and dripping in some type of chemical just to sustain its look and preserve it, okay, it can literally communicate from your organs, from your body to your brain, and your brain, your mind, your thoughts can have a sudden urge to have these damaging types of food products, like the sugars, like the meats, okay, like the processed foods, like the crackers, the chips, all of this shit, just random urges, right? And see, people don't understand that, ultimately we are what we eat, and food is medicine, okay? And we have gotten to a point in our history, quote unquote, that the way in which people are choosing to eat, choosing to manage their diet and health regimen, through exercises, through breathings, through the food that they consume, okay, the youngest generations are the first generation predicted to have shorter lifespans than previous generations. That is what is considered the opposite of evolution, right? Each generation is supposed to be an upgraded version, is supposed to improve, and again, this is the first time in history that has actually occurred. So this is a major indication, okay, and we need to take a step back and look at the truth about things too, because a lot of what people think are required in our diet, right, such as animals, right, because you get any type of animal-based protein. See, the biggest thing with this type of thinking, this type of concept, all right, really took form in the early 1900s, okay? The Industrial Revolution is what really capsized this idea that animal-based protein was pretty much the prime jewel of people's diets, okay? And eating meat, consuming meat, was a status symbol. If you did not have meat on your plate, then that was because you were in a certain tax bracket. Because the poor people, the people in the slums and the disadvantaged communities were eating bread and potatoes and corn and things of this nature, right? But as things evolved and as people started to take this whole protein system to heart, it became pretty much an essential in people's diets, okay? And or perceived as an essential, but really, in reality, protein is just a dense form of combination of amino acids that we can receive anywhere. There is nothing in nature, okay, that cannot be found in meats, right? And plant-based proteins and even the air we breathe has these amino acids that we cling on to and think that we need, but we do. But meat is such a dense form of it that, especially in large amounts of protein over time, this causes a lot of stress on the kidneys. This also creates a very acidic environment within and breeds these parasites. Okay, a lot of meat, is very hard to process. I mean, people have meat in their bodies from years before. Okay, the pork, especially if they don't understand these concepts because they're not cleansing their systems, right? And you have to cleanse your system. You have to cleanse your organs every so often, just like you get an oil change in your car, or else it's gonna fuck up. It's gonna the performance. You're gonna have, a bunch of sluggish performance. And this is what you see now, is people, a really close person revealed to me the hypnosis in actually starting to engage in conscious eating and conscious dietary habits when I said that I was cleansing, because this idea that cleansing, okay, is dangerous, okay, and that the basic fundamentals of clearing out your system is different, or it's not really required, or things of this nature, really shows to me how deep people are immersed in the matrix, and how the matrix has really been effective in this propaganda, because it's not true. And you could see that other countries, healthier countries, and it also has to do too with the food regulations, or the food regulating agencies, and how they go about conducting their business, how they view health and stuff. That also takes, but if you have a different approach in the way you view health, right, then you may not allow these things, because it's amazing, through the genetic, modifications that are taking place. Now people are, creating chickens, creating all sorts of animals, right, and produce and fruits, because, well, everybody's consuming at such a rapid pace, and there's really not as much resources that there could be to sustain. So now it's like people are creating these genetically modified creatures, okay, and putting a patent on it, right, and selling it to you, saying that you need it, and you don't really understand what is really that doing to your body, because again, you are what you eat. So if something is genetically modified, then what is it doing to your genes, right? And if the majority of people really understood where their products, where their meat was coming from, okay, the majority of people would not eat it. Okay, but it's really simple to just look away from the problem, or not necessarily look away. It's like when they say that you don't see the bigger picture, right? It's because if you look at a picture and you were infatuated over a minor detail in the illustration, you're like, oh, this is beautiful and this is what I'm going to focus on. But you don't take a step back and look at actually the whole expanse of the artwork, okay? Then you will basically, you'll be ignorant as fuck. And we have a lot of ignorant people that know they're ignorant, that know they're eating wrong, okay? But again, it's a lot of it has to do with not only what they think they deserve, but a lot of it also has to do with these parasites that actually influence them and take over their minds. Because if you look at how parasites really work in nature, right, to these insects, they all sorts of different kingdoms of the wild, you see different forms of parasites and what they do to creatures. Okay, and you know, they literally take over their minds, because nobody in their right mind would eat dead, decomposing flesh, right? That has underwent so much stress, abuse, released so much fear-based hormones and toxins into the blood that you are consuming death. So what you get is what you receive. You see what I mean? Why is so many people dying? Why are there so many health problems? Man, you could point to all these external issues around you. The fact is that we're not in touch with who we are and where we came from. And the fact that this type of system, this type of machine, this matrix that has basically provided us with a mirror image of nature and put it in front of us in the form of an apple or the form of a product, and say that this is what you need, it's not true. It is a carbon copy. It's a fraud, right? Because you're never gonna get what you would get in, if you were to go in nature, if you were to grow your own food, put your hands back in the roots of where you came from, feel it, have a relationship with your food, right? These are all principles that I know many people may find it to be strange. At the same time, many people are listening and are just thinking to themselves, that makes perfect sense. Because our ancestors, right, and, even people that live today understand that food is medicine, right? And what we consume influences us on the internal and the external, okay? And for the love of God, do some research, right? You have to, what you choose to consume mentally, spiritually, and physically is a representation of what you think you deserve. While everybody's running around and trying to get the best shoes, the best clothes, the best cars, right? All these external forms of expression, they're turning around and eating McDonald's and feeding it to their children. And I'm going to end on probably the most scariest note out there, because this is serious. Like I said, the youngest generations are predicted to live longer than, or less than previous generations before, for the first time in history. And of course, there's other factors that came into play besides diet, but this plays a huge role. And if you want to feed McDonald's to your children, understand that the power structures, right, and how much the black market influences the power structures and these corporations, that you might be feeding human flesh to your children. And this is how disgusting and obscene and outrageous food suppliers have become, just for profit. And not only that, it's not just for profit, it's for control. Because again, these types of products, when you consume these products, okay, you operate on a low frequency. And these messages that I've been conveying, I'm barely touching the surface with all these societies and how civilizations rise and fall and economics. That's all the surface. We're not even getting to the good shit yet, okay? But in order for people to even comprehend what's gonna come next, in order to comprehend, to get to the next level, you, right? You need to start treating yourself